1. For context, this was my very first job ever, and I ended up working at this place for 3 years before I left due to management. I worked at a Tex-Mex corporate restaurant you may have seen next to your local chili pepper restaurant, the one with the big lime on the sign. And this story actually starts about 2 weeks prior to the actual neck-snapping death threat, so buckle in. I was about 8 months into this job. Used to it, but not enough to be the no-nonsense server I am today. Word was trickling around the staff that a supposed 90 top, yes, 90 fluffing people, would be coming in 2 Sundays from now. Haha, sucks for whoever is going to be taking that, because they were coming at 7 p.m. and I only work Sunday mornings. The Saturday night before, I ended up staying later than normal. Can't remember the reason why, this was a few years ago, and could not fall asleep. So being the trusting person I am, I pull an all-nighter and decide to drown myself in energy drinks the next morning for my Sunday morning shift. As I was cleaning up after a 14 top, my kitchen manager, still to this day the best one ever, David, approaches me and goes, "Crimson, can you please stay tonight and help with the party of 75? Yes, now they were claiming to be 75 people. I at first protested, but David knew my weakness. He offered me 5 free meals, and if I helped take the table, I wouldn't have to take any other tables 2 hours before they were here. I relented and accepted my fate as one of the 5 people to take the table of festering preteens. My best friend, Abby, was also going to be taking this party, which was another reason I was so lax on taking this party. And mind you, I hadn't slept since Friday night, and I had been living off of coffee and energy drinks. Our restaurant had an indoor patio with glass windows that allowed patio tables to see into the restaurant and vice versa. And around 5 o'clock, we started to close off the indoor patio while taking tables out of the inside of the restaurant to put together the 75 top. But sorry to disappoint you guys, they are not the star of this show. No sir. The star of this show is the woman who sat in the 60s. Part of a 5 top served by beautiful Christy. I had the pleasure of running table 60's food as I auctioned it off. Big no-no, but we didn't have policy against that. I came to the final dish. QL equals quesadilla lady. Grande fajita nachos. Well, obviously it's that ladies, but she isn't even looking. Grande fajita nachos.
I ordered the quesadilla.
She crosses her arms in a huff as if the world is crumbling around her. I'm sorry for that, ma'am. I'll go let the kitchen know and we'll get a new order right out for you. Now, this kind of mistake isn't uncommon. Christy hit the wrong button on the point of sale. And since they're right next to each other, it happens a lot to servers who are either not paying attention or rushing about. After informing Christy and the kitchen of this error, I went back out to see if any more tables were to be moved for the 75 top. Classic aimless server stuff. We were starting to get busy, and since our restaurant sans the bar was seating booths, we had to wait. A family with a screaming child didn't like sitting in a booth in blue, our sections were colored, and decided to uproot themselves and sit in the inside section that would be for the other third of the 75 top. I walked over to the family and informed them that the section would be closed, but I was happy to seat them elsewhere. The mother was upset we wouldn't let them sit there as they pleased, but I eventually settled them in an empty booth by QL's table.
Excuse me.
Finally getting the table situated, I turned to QL. Yes, ma'am.
When's my food going to be ready?
I literally walked away from your table 5 minutes ago. Do you not understand food takes time to cook? I'm sure it won't be too much longer, ma'am. I apologize for the wait.
Get me your manager.
She could water the Amazons with the amount of spit she flung everywhere saying that. And by all means, I was more than happy to get her a manager so I wouldn't have to deal with her anymore. However, this manager was the spineless type. The one who would rather get trampled on than receive a bad review. Dear old Alan. She had the time of her life informing Alan of my incompetence and my horrendously rude attitude, which I was presently surprised to find we had the same opinion of each other. Alan said it would be best if I just kept to myself on the patio and wait for her to leave. I'm fine with this. I don't have to run food. I get to talk to Abby. I'm all set. We're looking in the restaurant, commenting on how busy Yellow is going to be since all they are is 6 booths for the night. We're talking about how much we're dreading taking this 75 top, but at least Yellow is going to make good money. And wouldn't you know, the lovely quesadilla lady happened to look over to the indoor patio and see me gesturing towards Yellow's booths, which happened to be right next to her table. I'd never seen someone make such a graceless entrance to the patio, yet still try to look extremely threatening in the process. This woman, a grown woman possibly in her 30s with 2 fluffing kids watching her do this, struggled to push the pull door on the patio, and when she finally figured out the door, she pulled it open so hard it hit the glass window next to it. The panes quivered but did not shatter, even after being manhandled by the fearsome quesadilla lady. I was standing next to Abby, and we both watched in horror as this woman screamed at me 10 feet away, not crossing the threshold to the patio but standing in the doorway.
If you have some shit to say, you better say it to my face.
Ma'am,
You sitting here talking shit, I'll snap your fucking white neck, you hear me?
At this moment, all I can do is laugh at her. I had been awake for over 24 hours at this point, and I seriously couldn't give a shit. All I could say over and over as she screamed about how she wanted to kill me was, "Thank you, ma'am. Have a great night." And good old spineless Alan must have heard the commotion and was meekly standing behind her, barely speaking above a whisper to try and get her attention. She eventually stopped and returned to her table in what I'm assuming a victory, since she got to tell off a teenager in customer service and threatened to kill them. She must have been so proud of herself. This is my favorite and most absurd story to tell to this day. It's always something that comes to my mind when I see other servers dealing with unruly customers. 2. I've been a bartender 6 years now and have moved up to a fine dining restaurant for 2. And my experience has been weird. I started off working a cheap local bar, then a corporate chain for a while. Then a hotel bar, and after that a cocktail bar. I would have stayed at the hotel bar, but it closed down unexpectedly. I would have stayed at the cocktail bar, but the same thing happened. That place was so horribly mismanaged. I probably actually wouldn't have stayed for all that much longer. After that, I got an interview and got hired at a fine dining restaurant. I had only had one other experience in fine dining, and that was earlier in my bartending days. I got hired by this restaurant owner who was awful and seemed to hate me, and I quit almost immediately. When I was younger, I worked for too many years for a boss who treated me like that, and I knew I couldn't put myself through it again. This was the first time I ever had any problems with a front-of-house manager, and it was my first job in a fine dining restaurant. Now I work at a different fine dining restaurant. I've been here about 2 years, and I'm at my breaking point with it. My manager didn't seem that bad at first. He would be snappy sometimes, but then cool other times. And since I was just learning everything, I figured that was how I needed to improve. Now that I'm confident in this job, however, he'll still snap at me and talk down to me. And it's just not something I'm okay with putting up with anymore. It's just not me. Every server I work with has been through the same treatment and has vocalized the same issues with this guy. One girl was brought to tears last week, and several I've known walked out specifically because of him. Since I never experienced this treatment from managers at any other type of bar or restaurant I've worked at, I wanted to ask all of you what your experience have been with fine dining. Is it just kind of accepted that it's okay for the front of house to be treated this way? Have you found verbal abuse of employees to be more rampant in this type of environment overall? Or is it just the places I've worked? I should note there is another chef and owner in this same city who has like 3 or 4 restaurants. I have never worked for him, but I've heard the same things from other industry people who've worked for him. Another fine dining nightmare story. I ask because I love the high-end plates the chefs can come up with, and making the craft cocktails and talking to people and learning all this new stuff about wine. I've worked in bars with people who come in rough around the edges, and I have to deal with them and listen to shitty music until 2 a.m. But the management was cool because they understood the job I had to do, and they were on my side if anything happened. I don't feel that now. I feel like I'm always on the verge of being chewed out for one little thing or the other, and it makes me stressed out all the time. 3. In my many eons upon this earth, I have experienced a veritable plethora of incredible things. By the time I was but a mere 16-year-old in human terms, I'd been to the highest peaks and to the lowest depths. I'd borne witness to the rise and fall of countless empires, and had even acquired the wisdom necessary to truly see why kids love the taste of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I, like many of my ilk at the time, believed myself to have seen it all. As it turns out, however, I was incorrect. This tale begins at a now-defunct Rooty-Poot second-run movie theatre, where I was briefly employed in the ancient year of 2005. There was nothing particularly special about the place. It looked enough like a standard cinema, just cheaper. The pay, much like the decor, was underwhelming to say the least. All things considered, I actually enjoyed that job for the most part. As a guy who speaks movie quotes as a second language, I felt truly in my element here. I got free movie tickets, free popcorn, the works. If theaters paid actual living wages, I would do that job again in a heartbeat. It wasn't all roses at the theater, though. I normally worked concessions, but I did have to usher and clean out the auditoriums after showings from time to time. You ever have to kick out a pair of teenagers for getting it on during a Tuesday matinee of The Corpse Bride, then had to clean their stains out of the seat? Yuck. Still, even that wasn't the most disturbing thing I ever had to deal with there. That brings me to the subject of today's story. Shit's about to get real, so whip out the Raisinets. You know damn well you snuck in here. Go grab yourself some popcorn. I made it myself. So there I was, working concessions and making the popcorn the way the good Lord Gojira intended, with 2 scoops of butter-flavoring salt. It was a cold Sunday morning, so there wasn't much action. That was about to change. I was talking to a co-worker about one of the movies we were showing at the time, when this guy walked into the lobby and just stood there staring into nothing for an uncomfortable amount of time. He did not move. His eyes wandered not towards us, nor towards the concession menus, or the promotional material throughout the lobby. He just stood there like a GTA Online player being a dick and AFKing during a contact mission, where we need everyone to get to the destination. My coworker and I looked at each other apprehensively. We were used to weirdos coming into this joint, but this stood out. The man continued standing there, his 1,000-yard stare transfixed on some incomprehensible madness that I luckily had the good fortune not to perceive. Several minutes went by, and yet the man remained utterly motionless. I whispered to my coworker, "So, should we say something?" He seemed hesitant, but then he nodded. "Yeah, I think so." He turned towards the man, still standing in the middle of the lobby, not facing us. "Excuse me, sir?" That's when it happened. The man's mouth opened, and the most hideous, wrenching sound escaped his lips and pierced my very soul. My coworker and I watched, horror-stricken, as the man began to vomit all over the lobby floor. This, however, was not like anything either of us had ever seen. It was blue. The puke was blue. And I'm not talking, oh, he ate some blueberries, and now there's a bit of blue in the chunks. I'm talking bright, vivid, liquid blue. I swear this person had been subsisting entirely on UV blue and Crest gel for who knows how long, because that's exactly what it looked like. This went on for far longer than any reasonably just and loving God would allow. We gazed speechless and wide-eyed at the enormous puddle of blue liquid and whitish blue foam that spread out across the lobby's floor. There was more of whatever the hell that stuff was than the guy had any business having inside of him.
"What the fuck?"
my coworker squeaked. Then the puker just turned around and left. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement that anything had even happened. He just walked right back out the doors into the world from which he came, where presumably he is still at large. My manager finally came out of her hidden lair to see what the commotion was all about. We informed her of the situation, and she took one look at the mess all over the floor and then looked at me.
All right, clean it up, TG.
No. She whipped back around to look at me.
What the fuck do you mean, no?
I stood my ground. I am not going anywhere near whatever the hell that is without a hazmat suit. You need to call a professional for this. And that, kiddos, is the story of how I got fired from the movie theater on Christmas. 4. So firstly, this happened a while ago, but still to this day haunts me. It also added to my fear of what goes on behind the scenes in some places. Secondly, I've worked in the service industry for about 6 years now, and this is one of the worst things I ever saw. Here we go. So a few months back, I left my job as a supervisor in a burger chain to go work in a cinema. I was going into my 3rd year of university and needed a step down to concentrate in my studies. Anyways, I was working one day checking people's tickets as they walked into the screens. The cinema has like 2 desks either side of the main foyer that we stand by. It was a pretty quiet day, so not many people were around when all of a sudden, from about 100 meters away, I saw a guy maybe in his 50s, kinda short, greyish receding hair, burst through the doors from the car park and start full-blown sprinting towards me. He was making excellent time as he ran through the foyer and straight at me, until the last second he veered off and ran down the corridor, like the film Get Out, if you know what I mean, towards the toilets. Oh yeah, the only toilets in the building are through the cinema by the screens. So I was a bit freaked out about the whole thing, but so far not too out of the ordinary. The guy was in the toilet for about 25 minutes before I started worrying, so I went to check on him. As I opened the door, I was met with the sound of a toilet flush, so I assumed he was just a little bunged up, and that he was done by now, so I left him to his business and went back to my desk. He then proceeded to leave calmly and give me the classic white person smile and nod as he went past. If only I'd known what he'd done to the toilet. Anyways, another 5 minutes passed and I went to do my scheduled screen and toilet checks. As I opened the door to the toilet, the first thing I noticed was a foul smell. Not just the typical aftershit aroma, but something way more insulting to my nasal passages. More like if in a parallel universe a shit became sentient, and that shit had a shit. That's the smell. Second thing I noticed was a pool of water coming from the cubicle. I lifted my top over my nose to protect from the stench and gingerly continued my journey into the toilet. Chapter 6. The Cubicle. So the cubicle itself was pretty rough. The toilet was completely blocked with a mixture of shit, toilet paper, and a pair of boxers which were either soiled previous to the event or used as a means to wipe. There were small nodules of poop floating around the toilet, which had been flushed but just filled up to the top and proceeded to spew shit water over the floor. Some of the nodules had ventured out and taken up residence around the base of the toilet. There was a small poop fingerprint on the side of the wall next to the toilet as well, which would indicate a struggle. Perhaps the guy had a fight with his poop. Anyways, point is, it was pretty bad in there. After I bore witness to Hal's toilet, I went and got my manager, who also took great offense to the cubicle of Satan. We then devised a plan of action. My first suggestion was that I would not go anywhere near it, but he said we had to clean it together and went off to get some supplies. He came back with a bin bag and a pair of tongs from the coffee shop in the cinema foyer. The tongs used for the paninis and sandwiches and such. We entered the bathroom and made our way to the danger zone, where my manager told me to stand by the toilet and hold the bag open. He then used the tongs and began to grab large chunks of poo and tissue from the water and place it into the bag. Then he grabbed the boxers and placed them into the bag, dripping some water onto my hand as he did. I audibly gagged. We looked at each other. He gave me a "fuck, I'm so sorry" look, and I gave him a "just fucking get on with it" look. The toilet then began to unclog and all seemed well. He cleaned the rest of the mess up. I think as payment for getting shit on me. I washed my hand like 18 times afterwards, by the way. Anyway, after all that drama, I went to get a drink of water from the sink behind the ticket booth. only to be confronted with the poop tongs. My manager had placed them in a cup of boiling water with some soap in. There was actually poo floating in the water. I asked the nearest person why they hadn't been thrown away, and was met with the classic, "not my problem" reply, so I went to find him myself, ex-supervisor, so my managerial side needed to find out why. I couldn't find him, so I went back to the sink. Guess what though? No tongs. I wonder where those could be. My manager put the poop tongs back in the coffee shop to be used again, thinking that goddamned hot soapy water is sufficient enough cleaning. Chapter I then had a go at him and threw away the tongs. What got me though is that the coffee shop people and other employees seemed to think that it wasn't even that big of a deal. Needless to say, I left that job and went back to the burger place. Imagine what else that guy had done. Like he thought that was an okay thing to do. 5. Not a server, but a long-time host and maitre d' here. This happened during a weekend brunch 2 weeks ago, but I still can't believe I had to have this conversation, so I'm sharing it here. Quick background. I work at a restaurant in New York City that's across the street from a tourist hotspot and is well known for its brunches. Massively popular with both New Yorkers and tourists. During patio sessions, it's common to do 800 covers in a 6-hour shift. Our patio has 4 huge 1,000-pound umbrellas that provide various sun coverage during different times of the day. There are between 20 to 28 tables out there, depending on whether we split some of our 4 top tables into deuces. The Saturday in question was sunny and warm, so we were packed. Our reservations were 100% booked and our waitlist was insane. But that's pretty normal for us. I'm on phones because they ring off the hook when we're in service and questions are pretty standard. What's the wait time? Can I make a reservation 10 minutes from now, etc. Then I get the following call. IG equals idiot guest. Thank you for calling. How can I help you?
Yeah, I want a table that's outside that's completely sunny. No shade at all.
This is a really unusual request. In the year I've worked there, it's mostly complaints about table whatever being too sunny. Want to move somewhere in the shade, etc. Never had someone ask that question. Just making sure I heard her right and in my best customer service voice. Ma'am, just making sure we're on the same page. You're looking for a table that has no umbrella coverage.
Yes.
We would be happy to accommodate your request, but that does depend on when you come in and are seated.
What do you mean?
Well, at different times during the day, some tables are sunnier than others. Some are fully covered by umbrellas. Some are partially covered by umbrellas. And we have a couple that are fully exposed to the sun. But that all depends on the specific time of day that you sit down to eat. IG is becoming both perplexed and annoyed.
What do you mean? Why can't you just answer my question? Do you have fully sunny tables or not?
I'm trying really hard to keep it together, and thinking a detailed answer might help clear up miscommunications. Well, I have one table at the far end of the patio that isn't in the shade, and is 100% sunny later on in the day, but not until the late afternoon. You know, when the sun starts to set in the west, because this table is western facing. Other tables that face the west also get sunnier as the day goes on. IG getting clearly pissed off.
Are you stupid? What are you talking about?
I tried for at least 5 minutes to politely and helpfully explain this concept to her, in increasingly simple terms and words. Didn't work. Finally she goes,
Okay, so you're not going to answer my question. Can you at least close one of the umbrellas so I can have a fully sunny table?
We can't do that during a packed and busy service for a lot of reasons. The biggest one being that 99% of the other guests want something outside in the sun but shaded. And remember, this is an 800 cover brunch. And everyone wants to sit outside. Not gonna happen. When you're at the point where you've tried 5 really simple ways to explain to a guest that the Earth rotates around the sun, and they aren't buying it, the chances that they're going to be up to date on various restaurant practices are slim. So I go with, according to New York City restaurant laws, it's illegal to do that, I'm sorry. She bought that. I finally convinced her to just come in, have a look at the outdoor tables, and decide for herself which table she'd like and how long she'd be willing to wait for it. I'm not sure if I didn't communicate well with her to explain the issue and there was a miscommunication, but I suspect she was just a dumbass. No clue if she came in or not. I was in dry storage talking myself into not putting in my 2 weeks then and there. I've dealt with a lot of dumbass guests working there, but that took the cake. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Spinning Plates number 48. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I was actually sitting on story number 4, probably not the best choice of words to use, but I've had it for quite a few months. I was planning initially on doing a theatre, or movie theatre, or just theatre in general, story special, but I couldn't get all the stories quickly enough. I've had them crop up here and there, but I couldn't get them in a quick enough time to actually do the video. So I've had that story sitting there recorded for quite some time, and I figured, you know what, it's close enough to a server story. There is a coffee shop. You work in the theatre, you're probably serving people concessions and things anyway. So I decided to pop it in here. I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who joined me for the impromptu live stream on Thursday we did. I was intending just to be streaming briefly to work out the kinks, but it ended up being a full 2-hour stream. So I may not stream this weekend since it's already done. I may not, I'm not sure. We'll see how bored I get. What I have to do, if the weather's good, as I hope it will be, I have to take care of the garden. I've got some tidying up around the house to do. And I may find time to eat and sleep among that. We'll see. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.